Jungkook finds a hidden secret in Taehyung's bag that shatters his world. Loyalty is tested, memories are twisted, and nothing is what it seems. "Why would you hide this from me, Tae?" Jungkook's voice cracked as his hands trembled, the photograph in his grip warping beneath the pressure of disbelief. The air was sharp with the sterile scent of cold concrete and something else. Damp fabric, perhaps. Fear, perhaps sweat. The dim light above them flickered, painting Jungkook's pale face in uneven strokes of yellow and shadow. Rain hammered against the high windows of the old rehearsal studio they hadn't used in months. Dust danced in the corners. The bag lay on the floor, open like a wound. Taehyung didn't speak. He stood frozen, his lips parted but unable to form words. His eyes, always so warm, so soft, were distant now, like he was somewhere else, somewhere far away from Jungkook, somewhere unreachable. Jungkook's gaze fell again on the item that had slipped from the inner lining of Taehyung's worn leather bag, the photograph. Faded, bent, but unmistakably real. 7 boys in a candid moment, laughing, eyes full of life. But what tore through Jungkook wasn't the photo itself. It was the red circle drawn around one of the faces, his own, and the single word scrawled beside it in ink that had bled into the paper. Target. His knees gave way before he realized they were buckling. He sat hard on the floor, the cold biting through the fabric of his jeans. His lungs couldn't find air. His brain couldn't find reason. The silence between them buzzed louder than a scream. "You weren't supposed to see that, Tae." Jungkook's voice cracked. Jungkook's voice was a whisper wrapped in regret. "Not yet." "Not yet?" Jungkook spat, the taste of betrayal turning to ash on his tongue. "You've been carrying this around while I trusted you?" Taehyung took a step forward, but Jungkook flinched. "It's not what you think," Taehyung said. His tone was careful, measured, like each word was being weighed against a landmine. "Then tell me what it is," Jungkook demanded, wiping his wet cheeks with the back of his hand. He didn't remember when he started crying. The tears just came, unstoppable, like something long held inside had snapped. But Taehyung didn't answer. His jaw clenched. His eyes flicked toward the door behind Jungkook, as if he expected someone or something to burst through it. Jungkook noticed, and he noticed the way Taehyung's hand hovered near his coat pocket. The same coat he'd worn the night Yoongi disappeared. The same night, Jungkook had heard footsteps outside his apartment, even though no one had knocked. The walls of his mind started to shift, realign. Tiny cracks in memories he had once trusted began to widen. He saw again the way Taehyung had been absent during Jin's meltdown, how he'd never quite explained the bruises on his knuckles or the locked drawer in his hotel room. "Is someone watching us?" Jungkook whispered, not sure if he even wanted an answer. Taehyung didn't respond, but his eyes said yes. Lightning tore across the sky outside, briefly illuminating the haunted look etched into Taehyung's face. And in that flash of light, Jungkook saw it clearly. Fear. Not just fear of being caught, but fear of what might happen if the truth came out. Jungkook's voice softened, barely audible now. "You were supposed to be my brother." Taehyung knelt slowly, leveling his eyes with Jungkook's. His hands were open, palms up, the universal gesture of surrender. "I still am. But you don't understand the kind of game we've been dragged into, and I had to protect you, even if it meant lying." "Then help me understand," Jungkook whispered, gripping the photograph like a lifeline. Taehyung closed his eyes, took a breath. When he opened them again, they were glassy, the color of storm water. "Do you remember the night of the soul blackout?" he asked. Jungkook nodded. How could he forget? The city had gone dark for 9 minutes. Phones died, GPS vanished, and when the power returned, Hosek was gone. Taehyung continued, his voice low and deliberate. "That wasn't an accident. It was a signal. A signal for what? Taehyung reached into his coat and pulled out a small black notebook. He handed it to Jungkook with both hands, reverently, as though it were sacred or cursed. Inside were names, dates, maps, surveillance photos, and symbols Jungkook didn't recognize, etched like ancient codes. But the last page stole the breath from his lungs. Target, Jungkook. Status, activated. He looked up, and the question tumbled from his lips before he could stop it. What the hell am I? Taehyung's answer came not in words, but in the sound of footsteps outside. Heavy, rushed, and then the distinct click of a lock being disengaged. Too late. Jungkook stood, gripping the notebook like a weapon. Taehyung grabbed his wrist.
"No matter what happens next," he said urgently, eyes burning with intensity, "you have to trust me now." And for the first time, Jungkook didn't know if he could. The doors slammed open with a crash that rattled the studio windows. A beam of blinding white light sliced through the darkness, catching particles of dust in its glare like frozen sparks. Jungkook's heartbeat roared in his ears, his body frozen between fight and flight. Taehyung didn't flinch. He stepped in front of Jungkook instinctively, his frame tense, eyes locked on the silhouette emerging through the light. A figure stepped into view, tall, clad in matte black, a tactical mask covering the lower half of their face. No insignia, no words, just a silent, calculated presence. Taehyung moved fast. "Run." Jungkook didn't ask. He bolted, the notebook clutched tightly to his chest, his boots slamming against the wooden floor. Behind him, the crash of impact, fists or bodies slamming into furniture, then Taehyung's voice grunting in effort, followed by a shattering noise that echoed like broken glass ricocheting off steel beams. Jungkook sprinted through the back exit into the alleyway, the icy rain pelting down in sheets. Neon lights from a flickering convenience store sign painted the wet asphalt in epileptic pulses of green and red. He turned left, barely avoiding a stack of trash bins, then vaulted over a low gate. His lungs burned. His thoughts raced. He didn't stop running until the alley gave way to a side street, then a small park where the old trees groaned under the weight of rain. Finally, behind a statue of a forgotten poet, he crouched, panting, shivering, soaked through. What the hell had he just escaped from? Who was that masked man? And more importantly, how long had Taehyung been part of this? He looked down at the notebook again. The paper was damp, ink bleeding slightly but still legible. He flipped back through the pages, the list of names, all familiar, all people from their past, managers, stylists, old staff, even some fans. Next to many of them, a single line. Status disappeared. But then, there it was. An entry that made his breath catch. Name, Kim Namjoon. Location, unknown. Status, last seen during Blackout Protocol Test number 03. He blinked. Namjoon had gone to the US a year ago. Or so they'd been told. Was it a lie? And then it hit him. The Blackout Protocol. The phrase Taehyung had just mentioned. The phrase linked to Hoseok's vanishing. Now Namjoon too. There was a pattern, but it was still a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Suddenly, a shadow moved behind him. Jungkook tensed, about to bolt again, until a familiar voice broke through the sound of the storm. "You're lucky I was tracking you," Taehyung muttered, ducking under a low branch. His hoodie was torn at the shoulder. A small gash bled down the side of his face. "You led them to us," Jungkook snapped. "Don't act like my savior." Taehyung didn't respond. Instead, he pulled something from his coat. A flash drive. "This has the surveillance logs from that night, the night Hoseok vanished." "And why should I trust it?" Jungkook spat, eyes narrowed. "Because," Taehyung said, voice taut, "you're not just some target. You're the last key." Jungkook shook his head. Key to what? A conspiracy? A government experiment? Some paranoid fan fantasy? Taehyung crouched beside him, his voice dropping low. Do you remember your childhood before Big Hit? Really remember it? Any birthdays, school friends, even a street name? Jungkook froze. It was a question he'd never dared ask himself, one he chalked up to the blur of fame, training, the high-speed whirlwind of youth given to a dream. But now that TAEHYUNG said it, the emptiness echoed. Jungkook began, but the words caught in his throat. There's a reason for that, TAEHYUNG whispered. And it's not amnesia. It's design. They sat in silence, broken only by the sound of rain dripping from leaves. TAEHYUNG handed him the flash drive. There's an address inside the metadata. Go there. Alone. Tomorrow night. And you? I'll buy you time. As TAEHYUNG stood, Jungkook grabbed his arm. His fingers were cold, trembling, not from the rain, but from the questions swelling in his chest. Why me? TAEHYUNG didn't smile. His eyes, usually so expressive, were hollow now, like he'd already seen the answer and hated it. Because you're not who you think you are. With that, TAEHYUNG turned and disappeared into the night, swallowed by the rain and shadow. The next evening, Jungkook found himself in front of a crumbling building on the outskirts of Seoul, an abandoned school swallowed by vines and rust. He walked through the empty halls, the air thick with mold and time. He followed the coordinates embedded in the flash drive to a locked storage room beneath the auditorium. The door was already open. Inside, files, hundreds of them, metal drawers lining the walls. On each, a label with a name. He reached for the one that read, Jungkook.
The folder inside contained documents, photos, scans, hospital charts, brainwave analyses, a certificate with the seal of an unknown organization. At the bottom, a photograph of a much younger Jungkook, eyes wide, a barcode tattoo visible behind his ear. His fingers drifted to the same spot on his own skin. Nothing, no mark. He turned over the photo. A handwritten note was scrawled on the back. Subject 17. Memory suppressants successful. Genetic variants, high risk, high value. Initiate observation phase under idle project. The walls around him tilted, his knees caved out, and he collapsed onto the cold floor. So much of his life, his past, his choices, even his identity, had been curated, sculpted, falsified. And the people he thought he knew, were they agents? Were they victims like him? He didn't even hear the person enter the room behind him. Only when a soft voice whispered his name did he turn, and his eyes widened with disbelief. Standing in the doorway, coat dripping from the rain, was Namjoon, alive, different, and looking at him like a stranger. "Hello, Jungkook," Namjoon said calmly, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk about what you really are." "You died," Jungkook breathed. His voice came out hoarse, almost childlike in its desperation. "You disappeared. They said you never came back from LA." Namjoon stepped further into the room, silent. He wore the same softness in his eyes, but there was something different now. A quiet wariness that didn't match the man Jungkook remembered. A burden too long carried. His hair was slightly longer, grayer at the edges, but his presence was exactly as Jungkook remembered. Calculated, heavy with thought, deliberate. "He had to," Namjoon said finally. "They were watching. Even now they are." Jungkook stood slowly, the file still open in his trembling hands. "What is this? Why is my life in a drawer? What the hell is the Idol Project?" Namjoon exhaled through his nose, almost like a sigh. He approached the old desk in the middle of the room and slid open a drawer, retrieving an old cassette recorder. He placed it down and pressed play. A voice, distorted but unmistakably official, filled the room. "Subject 17. displays high empathy retention under stimulant-induced conditions, recommended for long-term observation within the artificial celebrity matrix. Memory adjustments completed Q4. Deploy to public. Jungkook felt like he was floating outside his body, as if the voice was speaking about someone else, a test subject, a machine in human form, a ghost masquerading in his own life. "They manufactured us?" he asked, barely trusting his voice. Namjoon looked him dead in the eye. "They designed us, built us for performance, obedience, idolization. You were one of the final batch, part of the synthetic memory trials." Jungkook shook his head, but the shaking didn't stop even when he gripped the edge of the desk for support. "So everything I remember? My family? My childhood? The auditions? Fabricated," Namjoon said. "Constructed memories, emotional implants, designed to drive artistic output and public relatability. You were meant to feel real. That's why it worked." Jungkook's breathing grew shallow. He clenched his jaw to stop the shaking. His whole life, every moment of vulnerability shared on stage, every tear, every song he poured himself into, was that all programming? "No," Namjoon said softly, almost as if reading his mind. "You felt it, so it was real. Even if they made the frame, the canvas is still yours." Silence stretched between them. Then Jungkook spoke, his voice hollow. "And TAEHYUNG? What is he?" Namjoon hesitated. He wasn't supposed to remember, but the protocol glitched. He started piecing things together 2 years ago, tried to warn me. That's when they activated the purge. Jungkook's eyes widened. "The purge? Like Hoseok?" Namjoon nodded grimly. "They erase us when we deviate. Hoseok found his birth record buried in a foreign database. That same week, he vanished." Jungkook couldn't take it anymore. He turned and drove his fist into the filing cabinet, metal denting with a sick clang. His knuckles bled, but he welcomed the sting. It felt real. "Why me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why not just erase me too?" Namjoon's eyes flicked down to the notebook in Jungkook's hands. "Because they couldn't. Not you. You're the failsafe." "What does that mean?" Namjoon walked over to another filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder marked Primary Neural Sync. He opened it and pointed to a line of code embedded in a brainwave scan. "You were built to evolve, to adapt beyond the control protocols. You weren't their idol. You were their prototype for artificial consciousness. They made a soul and didn't realize it." Jungkook stared at the line of code. It pulsed across the page like a lifeline. Alive, untethered. "You're telling me I'm not even fully human?"
Namjoon hesitated. "You're more than human." Before Jungkook could respond, a distant rumble echoed through the building. Boots, several pairs, moving fast. Namjoon's head snapped up. "They found us." Jungkook turned toward the entrance, but Namjoon stopped him. "There's no time to run. They'll expect it. There's something else. Your neural key, it's not in your brain. It's embedded in your music." Jungkook blinked. "What?" Namjoon was already digging through a crate and pulling out a thick hard drive labeled JJK Master Session Volt. They hid the failsafe code in one of your unreleased tracks. The melody triggers a wave pattern they can't overwrite. That's why they didn't kill you. They need you alive to extract it. "They think I don't know," Jungkook muttered. Namjoon looked at him, his expression shifting from urgency to a strange peace. "But now you do." The door burst open, flashlights swept the room. Jungkook grabbed the hard drive. Namjoon turned and faced the light, raising his hands. "Run," he said. Jungkook hesitated. "Run!" He bolted through the back, weaving through the dark maze of the underground corridor, clutching the drive like his life. His truth depended on it. He didn't stop. Not when he heard Namjoon cry out, not when gunshots rang out behind him, not even when his tears blurred the exit signs. He emerged into the night, bleeding, breathless, drenched. 3 weeks later, the world watched as Jungkook stood on stage alone during a surprise live stream in a dark studio lit only by a single white spotlight. His face was gaunt, haunted, but resolute. I wrote this song years ago, but I never knew what it meant until now. He sat at the piano, fingers trembling, but steady. The melody began, slow and haunting, minor chords that pulsed like a heartbeat. Behind him, encrypted audio pulses wrapped in the song's digital signal, an algorithm that would, once released, scatter the idol project's deepest data across the world's cloud systems. Unstoppable, untraceable. As he played, something in him settled. He wasn't just a product of code or memory. He was pain. He was choice. He was defiance. He was human. And as the final note faded into silence, the world changed without ever knowing why.